everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the Y-Axis podcast. I am your host, Tristan Yver, and today I have the absolute pleasure of a returning guest from previous podcasts, Evgeny, the founder and CEO of Wintermute. Welcome, Evgeny.
Hey, really nice to have you again.
Yeah, I'm happy every time we get to have these conversations, get to meet up in person. I want to start maybe perhaps in a different track than other times. And other times we've kind of gone into your past and you've told the story of how you've went from, traditional trading into crypto and to starting your own company. Rather than that this time, and we can still get into those things, I want to hear a little bit of a download from you on how the last, 8 months have been. It's some of the most tumultuous times we've seen in crypto, I think probably in the history of crypto, just because of how big it got before everything sort of went to shit over the last year in some regards. So I would love to hear from your perspective, generally maybe the things that stand out the most to you and how this experience has been for you and your company.
Yeah, that's quite a broad topic. I guess like a general theme is just how it kind of resets everyone's views about how stuff supposed to work, like kind of super cycle or what's not. Like all those things got reset out of sudden. And to me, that was like the main learning point, because I don't know, if I look like 1.5, 2 years ago, it was all about this exponential growth and everything is happening, and I don't know, FTX is the main exchange, and I don't know, we're gonna get adoption and what's not, and it's all like going, and then suddenly like everything collapses and you start to question like all the narratives. You start to question like, well, who was actually the smart person in the room all this time? And basically for the past 6-9 months, it's been a lot of like re-evaluation, a lot of like understanding like what's our positioning should be. Like, is it potentially better that it happened this way instead of, I don't know, maybe a bit even further down the line when all those bad actors could have potentially succeeded as well. It's a lot of all those topics. I think especially this last point is, I think it's ultimately for the best that we didn't have all those guys succeeding ultimately, because I think there was a future where they could have got away with it and became, I don't know, business icons or what's not, and we would actually never know what transpired in the background. And now we, as an industry, have an opportunity to start anew and actually flush out all the sectors and actually do something decent.
I totally agree. I'm even though it was so harmful for so many people, I find it so much better that it came to the light now than in a place where Sam had solved the corporate capture, had gotten deeper into politics, had gotten into places where he was just completely entrenched and perhaps managing much more money. So I think that's a really interesting perspective. I'm curious for you guys as a trading firm, one of the largest, if not right now, maybe the largest crypto native trading firm. What does it look like when something like that day of FTX's withdrawal is closing? Like, it's such a black swan event. You guys probably saw the lead up over the weekend of like people saying things were looking strange, but I'd love to hear kind of as a trading firm, what were those few days like, and kind of like how did you guys react?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I mean, we were caught off guard just like everyone else. Like, my mass back in the time was, okay, our perception is Alameda is super successful and super profitable. FTX is super profitable. Like, there is no way in hell there could be massive issues. So all we see is basically, I don't know, people trying to withdraw. So we withdrew some of our funds as well. But that was primarily because we just wanted it for operational efficiency. We sort of thought, okay.
Sorry, one sec. I'm bleeding all over. I have a cut on my toe and I just kicked something. Give me one sec. I need to clean this. Sorry about that. I have a pretty nasty cut on my toe, and I just kicked the stool and it opened it up again. So
Ouch.
my apologies. Would you like me to reframe the question?
Yeah, let's just
Okay.
start again. Yeah, probably easiest.
So FTX's collapse was a huge black swan event in the sense of it's not something that you could easily predict or think through as a trading firm, even though that is your priority is to think through what the eventualities of things are. So I'm very curious, how did you guys react to such an event, to something that changed the industry so much?
Yeah, I think like what it changed for us was like nobody is safe basically. Like before that, I had a lot of assumptions about who is safe and who is not safe in a space. Post FTX, we went super safe in that regard. Like we basically withdrew from pretty much all exchanges. We closed down like pretty much all positions and took it very seriously because like the way our risk framework works, like we don't keep too much capital in any given exchange. So like just to ensure that we don't go bankrupt if something happens. And FTX was pretty much a black swan event for us. We wanted to make sure that if two or three more of those happen, like we'll still be fine. And so basically 2, 3, 4 months post FTX, we continued to be super vigilant. We did this like crazy fire drills with Binance, for example. Every time there was some news events or like a particularly high amount of withdrawals, we just basically withdrew everything, closed all positions, and we kind of perfected this to a pretty decent degree. I think like our record was like 1 hour to close down everything and withdraw as much as possible. So yeah, operationally we got to a pretty decent place risk-wise. But yeah, I think that was the main learning point, just to be ready, because you just don't know what can happen. Like if FTX happened, like everything can happen pretty much.
Yeah, that's something that's so fascinating actually, because from my perspective, it's a black swan, but from your guys' perspective, whose entire job it is to predict what things will do, for it to also be such a black swan means it just really shook everyone in this industry to the core. Like it was such an unexpected event. And I'm curious, outside of the interpretation you now have of who was smart before versus who actually is or was smart, what other priors of yours have changed in regards to the industry? What other sort of assumptions do you not take as truths anymore?
Mm-hmm. I would say I just stopped elevating people, I guess, to a big degree. Basically, I don't hold anyone in high regard. I guess it sounds pretty bad, but it is what it is. Like it's basically I'm like whoever is or was considered to be super good. I'm basically I'm just assuming kind of like neutral position towards them now, which helps because I did have like really high perception of certain people that proved to be wrong. And it's like on one hand it's like it's not great because I don't think nice about people. On the other hand, it's kind of like it has this weird effect of raising your own confidence because you think, okay, like if other people are not so great after all, like maybe it's actually we are doing quite all right and I'm doing quite all right. And I guess it's also very weird. Like it's something I've been coming to terms with over the last few years actually, is just understanding how imperfect humans are in general, I guess. And kind of like tying in with all this like AI narrative, it kind of feels like it really makes sense that AI will replace a lot of human jobs because humans are just like so imperfect, so unreliable, and so bad in a lot of ways.
Do
Yeah.
you have a sense? I'd be curious on your sense of which things AI will more easily replace and which things may stay uniquely human.
I kind of have like a pretty depressing perspective. I think AI can replace pretty much everything because I think AI is not that different from us. because it's basically copied from us, right? Like, well, it's the current iteration of it or whatever. And like, if it continues to be developing in the same way, in the same vein that it just like learns on sum of all human experience, it will be pretty much us. So it will be as good as us, I guess, but it can certainly be improved. It can certainly be, it's like, you can get rid of certain biases, you can get rid of certain, you can get rid of laziness, for example. Yeah, you can make it like way more optimal than any human can ever be. So I think like everyone can be replaced ultimately. That's my kind of like sad
So
perspective.
you think it's capable of creativity, and new idea generation as well, just off inference of past things that have occurred?
It's kind of like how in this movie I, Robot, like, yeah, can you write a symphony? Like, I think it's as capable as we are, because we are like, I don't think humans can create anything ultimately new. Like, everything that we create is based on our experiences, is based on whatever we saw. Like, even if we don't recall something, like I can walk on the street and randomly, like at the back of my head, see something, and then maybe it will inspire something in me next day or whatever. Like, ultimately, I don't think we create anything new. And so AI also is not going to create anything new. It will just process information same way as we process information subconsciously. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just want to dig a little bit more into that. So from your perspective, generally anything that we consider net new is an inference of something that already existed that was just processed differently in that sort of creative's head. Is that a way of framing it?
Pretty much, yeah.
So this kind of brings me back to my conversation with Tarun around math and like figuring out these equations. Were they already there? In your perspective, were they already there, existing in nature, and that's why we're able to deduce them? Or are people figuring out ways to create equations that represent nature that didn't exist beforehand?
I think it's like, my perspective, I guess, is just we are trying, like, all this math and all this logic is basically us trying to come to terms with, well, trying to explain how, trying to put some kind of framework on how the universe works ultimately. So I guess it's like our imperfect understanding about how stuff works. So we definitely don't invent anything new in that regard, because stuff that we are trying to describe is already there. But what we do invent is all those frameworks, and that's, yeah, pretty original, well, for every human being when they come up with them. But they're still imperfect. Like, all those, like, whatever we describe, whatever those frameworks are, they always will be imperfect. Like, I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we can perfectly describe everything.
And in part that's because there's so many dimensions we just don't understand or incapable of measuring as humans, or is that because nature is a higher level of perfection? What's your sense on that?
Yeah, it's like, I'm pretty sure there are dimensions that we cannot feel or perceive or understand ultimately. Yeah. It's like, I don't know, we cannot hear radio waves, but they're over there. Like, it's like there can be so many dimensions that we are not even aware of. And ultimately, yeah, we do best we can to describe what's around us. And you also need to add on top of, like, all kinds of biases we have, because, okay, we are trying to do logic, but it's always biased with, well, some of all human knowledge that was built before us, right? So it's like, it can never be perfect effectively. And even like AI in its current iteration, it also would never be able to achieve this, because it's still like, AI in its current iteration is still built on top of human experience.
If you were starting a career now or soon and you had this perspective on the direction AI was going in, what would some things that you would focus on be that you think would allow you to kind of like keep a moat on your wrapper on a soul and meat or whatever?
Yeah, I guess to start with, like, it might sound pretty depressing when I'm saying, like, oh, AI will replace all of us, but ultimately, like I think what's inevitable is inevitable. Like if it has to happen, there is no way of stopping it, and so we should, I guess, enjoy the ride. That's my more or less broad perspective. And so if
Mhm.
I would start with something like, I don't know, I like computer games, I would just go and create a computer game where NPCs would actually talk like normal people, for example. I think that would be awesome. Or in the blockchain space, like you can like introduce AI maybe in the smart contracts and create like bunch of same sentient smart contracts that will, I don't know, trade or do funny stuff. Like you can do a lot of fun things with it. I think it's all about like embracing it and like see what happens. So I'm not like I might sound like a doomer, but I am not like, I don't want to bomb data centers. I just want to see it through, I guess.
Got it. And so that would be essentially to figure out ways to use this new technology and be good at it for it as it develops over time, and to potentially being kind of like the center of everything.
Yeah, and maybe even just accelerate that adoption, and so that we in our lifetime see how it all ends potentially, or maybe in our lifetime we see how it all actually helps humanity to reach next level.
And as a gamer, I'm curious about that because I saw a little clip of a AI. I think in the NVIDIA presentation, he showed a little clip of a NPC having a AI generated conversation, depending on sort of like what was asked of him. Do you think this is kind of what's going to happen generally in gaming? Like they'll use it for procedural mapping, they'll use it to just extrapolate. They'll maybe make bases and then have AI extrapolate that outwards. Or how do you think this is going to affect game development?
I think it's like multiple things. Yeah, it's definitely, well, art or like a level design, generally like it. Yeah, all this like procedural expansion of space you're like play in. Like there are like all those procedurally generated randomly games already, and you can improve so significantly on top of it if you, because they can be way more advanced than they currently are. So I don't know, you can just create like a whole new concept out of like inside the same game, as long as it's powerful enough to process this stuff, of course. And that's what I'm really curious about. Yeah, just how you can, like how powerful your machine would need to be to actually run those things. And I think that's, yeah, Nvidia and others, like that's what their focus would be next, like, I don't know, 5-10 years.
Yeah, I'm excited to see very small teams or even individuals with access to a lot of compute potentially being able to spin out awesome games, because that's been one of the big handicaps so far is just it takes so many people and so much time to produce a AAA game that I wonder what's going to happen to the world if these are coming out consistently all the time. Um, are you personally doing any investing into the AI space? Are there any things you find like as a company interesting at the moment?
Not really. I think like most of the, okay, it's my like, I guess, cursory examination at the moment, but it's kind of my guess that most of the AI in blockchain currently is bullshit, most
Mhm.
likely. And because it's just people trying to jump on the bandwagon of it. Like none of the blockchains are yet have enough firepower to, well, run AI as it
Mhm.
stands. So you would need to have some kind of like centralized entity to actually produce the input, well, get the input and produce output. Like you cannot run the stuff on blockchains. Like they're just not there. Throughput is just not there, and I don't think it will ever be. Um, and so we don't do any investments in the space. Like we don't venture outside of blockchain as well because it's not our core expertise. Like we are very focused, like with our venture stuff, we are very focused on blockchain. Like we don't venture outside at all because otherwise, yeah, we just completely lose whatever makes us, well, whatever makes us better than other people on the investment side of things.
On that note, what does Wintermute look like right now? How many people are there on the team? What are the different divisions looking like?
Right. It's about 95 of us at the moment. Majority is still developers, and it's basically kind of like on the core business is kind of like three pieces. So we have DeFi, we're still going pretty strong there. We have centralized exchanges trading, and we have OTC. So those are three core businesses. That's where majority of people operating effectively. On top of it, we augmented quite a bit our core. So we have a lot of control support functions that we hired over the last 6-12 months, which I'm quite happy about. In general, like one thing I'm really happy is just how kind of slow and controlled we grew over the last 2-3 years. Like we didn't need to do any layoffs. We didn't need to do any like course correction even. We are currently just continuously hiring because like we know where we want to get. But one thing that changed over the last, I'd say like 12 months or so is we are looking much more into the product space. So we are looking much more into, okay, what kind of protocols we can incubate within Wintermute, what kind of businesses we can create or co-create with somebody else. Because basically the general theme for us is, okay, it's tough now, it's bear market. Okay, we've been here before, we've been through 2018, 2019. Now it's just the time to survive, conserve resources on one hand, but also invest into the next bull market when it comes. And so like this product side of things is very important for us because it allows us not just, to make a lot of money when the next bull market comes from trading, but also hopefully capitalize on growth and value of the adjacent businesses that we create.
That makes a lot of sense. And so are you looking at liquid tokens from the same perspective or mostly just like equity or locked sort of like vesting token deals when investing?
It doesn't really matter. Like I think it's way more equity deals now compared to before. People start to realize that tokens are do not necessarily carry as much. Like it's much more speculative kind of bet in a lot of cases. And we also kind of learned our lesson. Like we used to be doing similar to what a lot of our competitors did, but also what all the big players did, like kind of like spray and pray, pretty much, which we stopped around 12 months ago. And instead we put in a very structured approach, very like, it's almost like PE kind of approach, where there is a lot of due diligence, a lot of actually looking, a lot of examining, and we refuse way more protocols than we accept ultimately now, which I'm quite happy with personally, because it's just much more appropriate, I guess, especially given that, all the craziness of the last cycle.
Since you're doing less checks, have check size increased, or it's still like similar size, just way less investments?
It's similar, and also like given it's a bear market, the valuations reduced quite significantly as well, which again is quite nice. Like before we would see all these like startup companies starting with like 100+ million valuations for their tokens, and it just didn't make any sense. Now everyone is much more modest, much more reasonable, which I quite like.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. How much have you seen private markets gone down so far? Have they kind of met public in some sense? Because I knew there was a big dislocation for a while there. Has that gap closed where private is closer to public market valuations?
I think it's closed somewhat. It's more like not enough. There are not so many people selling in like the secondary transactions. I think everyone who needed to sell, they sold already maybe half a year ago. Now everyone who survives, they just want to wait it out and see when it all picks up. But yeah, like secondary valuations decreased quite substantially, which made sense.
Yeah, I mean, what does a company, not to pick on anyone, but I'll just use Opensea as an example because they did a raise at 13 billion. How does a company get through having a raise at that valuation, giving equity comp at that valuation, then obviously the reality of the market being much, much, much lower?
Yeah, I think, this whole question about talent and crypto and like how people move around and how people, finding these compensation structures. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting one. Yeah, I hope that whoever works at a company which used to be valued 10+ billion, they can take into account and divide it by 2 or 4 or even more potentially, because it just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it's ultimate. Like we see a lot of people moving jobs in general. Like it's been really good market for us as an employer, because we see a lot of like really decent talent. It was really horrible 1.5, 2 years ago where you just couldn't find anyone good at a good price, basically, because people like any, I don't know, any Solidity developer, like they would effectively have a choice of joining us and I don't know, get a nice bonus, a bit of equity, but that's it. Or you can go and create your like shitcoin protocol and make like a few million just in a couple of months. This choice is not here anymore, thankfully. So yeah, now it's much better. But also like a lot of talent on control side, on support side, it's also much more abundant, and it's quite nice to be able to choose the best. Yeah.
One of the big problems I see in the crypto space is how fast founders get liquidity on tokens specifically. I think the incentive models are just very misaligned, to be honest. And I'm curious if you're seeing any changes in this for teams that are doing tokens. Are they having longer lockups? Is that something you guys are asking for, or is it still sort of the same as it has been?
I think like 4-year vesting with 1-year cliff is pretty standard now. Like we don't see that many exceptions to that. So it's kind of like going back to what was very much normal in normal startup world.
But even that's like pretty fast compared to equity, right? Like equity, you're probably going to have like a 2 and 2, 4 year, half 2 year, half at the 4 year, or something like that, or not really. It depends.
Well, with equity, you could get vesting in a year, but there's not so much you could do with it, right? Like there was either no secondary market or there would be nobody buying or selling in the first place. Yeah, tokens is different. I think tokens is like, I think it's also about general optics of it. Like if you're a decent protocol, you will think twice before, well, as a founder, you'll think twice before selling, I guess. It's especially for ERC20, for example, it's much more easy to control because you can track everything on chain, you know, like what wallets belong to Binance, for example, or Coinbase. So you can pretty much see people cashing out. And there are so many like whatever blockchain detectives these days. It's it's just not worth it to like you can basically destroy your whole reputation like this, just like that. I think it's a bit easier for new blockchains where those internet, well, where those like crypto detectives are not that good at yet. But I think even those will be cracked at some point. But I think that's one of my favorite things about blockchains is just how transparent it is ultimately. And I think it's just looking at how those like new token issuers effectively distribute those tokens, and you can exactly track like who those tokens go to, and if you have access to white paper, you also know like, okay, is this guy just cashed out? Like I think it's just so awesome to be able to see it in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially as more and more people start paying attention to those things. I think for a long time, no one really looked. And now people are like, oh, the founder's selling all his tokens. Why would I ever buy that token? That makes no sense. Um, I'm sure you're very plugged in with the regulatory environment, probably at a worldwide level at this point, just because you guys are such a big crypto firm. You need to be seeing what's happening. What's your sense? Let me give you my sense, like a little summary, and then curious how you feel about this. So it seems like U.S. had a very strong allergic reaction to crypto after SBF because so many of them had received money from SBF. So they went completely onto the other side to kind of showcase to the world, hey, we have no involvement with this. Crypto's bad. We hate crypto. Other jurisdictions saw this and said, oh, wow, we should capture some of this talent, some of this brain power, and started again signaling to being more open to crypto, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and started trying to acquire these teams and this talent. And then as of recently, Larry Fink and the BlackRock ETF application, to me, seems maybe like a shot across the bow to politicians, letting them know, hey, like you're going too hawkish on crypto. Perhaps that's not the correct stance. But curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I would start by separating Bitcoin and maybe Ethereum to a degree from the rest of it. So I think like all those Bitcoin ETF applications, it's not necessarily an indication of how like of any changes in regulatory environment. Like you can get, I don't know, dozens of those Bitcoin ETFs approved, but it still will keep US as a very hostile environment for crypto as a whole. So I'll start with that. Like my kind of prediction at the moment is the rest of the world will be very allergic to US on the crypto side of things, and it can actually backfire in a pretty bad way. And it will basically, like, we already see pretty big like crypto companies effectively just choosing not to deal with US people, but also being very like defensive and like, okay, I don't know, if you have any kind of like possibility of control from US, like if there is any like kind of like nexus in US that potentially can expose us to US regulators because of that, we don't want to deal with you. And so I think it will be really hard for US companies to deal with non-US companies on the crypto side. It can potentially be really hard for US developers, for example, to start their own companies because people might not want, well, certain companies who want to be super safe just wouldn't want to deal with them. And it can be just like a new order of things where US will be very much sidelined. That's kind of like my strange prediction on this.
Taking, let's say, your residency and your biases out of the picture, if you were looking to start Wintermute today, do you have a sense on what country, what jurisdiction you would start it in?
Yeah, I think like Europe would make a lot of sense. In general, Asia would make a lot of sense as well. Like in general, okay, I'm very much a big city, big country person. So like I wouldn't necessarily want to start it like in Caymans or Bahamas or like stuff like that. Like I think like starting in a place like London or Amsterdam or Singapore or Hong Kong would make a lot of sense simply because the talent is here. I think to me it's all about talent and attracting talent. So I would look at big cities, English speaking, with good universities around, or easy to attract effectively people to move there, like Amsterdam, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, what's going on with crypto in Europe right now? I know that they were passing a licensing regime where if you have a license in one country in Europe, it'll expand to the rest of Europe. Is that still in the books?
I'm like, my guess it would be like very much this kind of like passporting regime effectively, yeah. But it also, well, good thing about most regulators outside of US is that they are not as overreaching. So if you deal with Europe, you need to make sure you don't break any of those regulations when you deal with Europeans. But what you do outside of Europe is, yeah, they don't necessarily not like care, but it's not the like prerogative to police rest of the world, unlike US.
Yeah.
So it's from that perspective, it's much easier to deal with them. But also like regulators in general, like in outside of US, they're pretty receptive and they're pretty like interested to learn things. Like whether it's Singapore, Switzerland, or UK, even like it's they're pretty interested to try to understand how to navigate it, like how to attract people, how to attract businesses, how to regulate it basically differently, not just like try to fit it under the existing rules.
What has changed for you on that front since coming through the other side of this, showcasing that you guys were sort of, always a legitimate, smart firm and you came through the other side of one of the hardest times in crypto? Has there been more outreach from regulators trying to understand the space more? And like, have you felt that Wintermute has sort of gone up in legitimacy since all of these events happened, or has it stayed relatively the same?
I think it's more or less, well, when it comes to regulators, it's more or less the same. But then again, like we don't deal with that many of them. Like we deal with FCA. With FCA, yeah, I think it did help that we survived all this. So, but in general, we always had a pretty constructive dialogue with them, and that didn't change. So we still discuss things constructively. It's generally pretty positive dealing with them. Like in general, it's a pretty big focus for us to venture into TradFi space. I think in Europe especially, it will all about that. It will all about basically start trading on TradFi exchanges, for example, start like moving into this like more regulated space and making ourselves more regulated. So we currently register with the FCA for our OTC business. We would potentially be looking to expand that and basically be covered by more and more regulations, because it basically helps us to deal with bigger number of counterparties, for example, in Europe when it comes to OTC business. It allows us to do more effectively.
That was my next question. So you guys, have grown to the size that you are now. You are one of the largest crypto firms as far as trading firm in crypto. How do you grow from there? Like, especially now that we're in a bear market and sort of the upside is capped at the moment, at least until we get another resurgence. Are there other avenues such as like actually TradFi trading you guys are considering, or is it more so being able to service the TradFi customers with crypto?
Yeah, it's basically everything adjacent. So like when I'm saying TradFi, it's, for example, expanding to CME or expanding to Eurex, or maybe trades ETFs or ETPs listed in Europe, which are crypto related. So I'm not yet looking into start trading, I don't know, S&P futures or oil futures or gold. Like maybe we'll get there, maybe not, we'll see. Like maybe with real world assets making a big change on the blockchains, we'll have to do it. But for now, like there are enough like adjacent territories for us to invade effectively. And funny enough, like we see a lot of TradFi market making firms actually venturing way, way deeper, like on the European side, venturing way, way deeper into crypto than we would expect them to. So not just trading on, I don't know, Coinbase or Binance, but actually moving into DeFi, moving into like altcoin trading. Like we see that as well.
This is kind of a flag for you guys to be like, oh, we need to get into there before they sort of take this sector in some senses.
No, it's more like they invading our turf, and we thought, okay, we might as well invade theirs. So it's like,
yeah, no, I love to see. I would love for crypto native firms to be at the same level as some of these largest traditional institutions, just because the ethos is so different. And so that actually leads into my next question. I'm sure you speak to a lot of people in TradFi, a lot of people who are in like very big companies who manage a lot of money. What how do you feel that they perceive you, right? Like you came from their world, you said fuck this, I'm out, I'm going to do my own thing in a world that I believe in. Do they treat you differently? How do you feel when you're in these conversations?
no, it's all. I think it's kind of like once a TradFi, always a TradFi kind of thing. Like it certainly helps that I worked in TradFi, worked at Optiver. Like people recognize it still, even though it's been like 6 years. It helps. Like it's much better. It's basically like it's not an uphill battle really, because people, oh, you worked at Optiva, or you dealt with, or you traded on that exchange, or you traded those products. It's like even though it's been 6 years, so it's still instant recognition. So it's quite all right actually.
So people can relate to you.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of like a, I don't know, this weird kind of like pedigree or whatever sign of, okay, you're actually not one of those weird crypto people, just you're still one of us. Yeah.
little do they know you are definitely one of the weird crypto people. What's going on with U.S. Crypto market makers? Are they winding down shop? What are you seeing?
Um, the general sense is they are definitely scaling down. Yeah, I don't know. My guess is they will just try to figure out a way to do it again, or maybe they'll just regroup and figure out, okay, maybe we come back when new bull market starts and regulators are like not as aggressive anymore. Because currently, it's not necessarily worth it to go back massively, because volumes that are at like multi-year lows. It's like for a lot of those firms, it's just the opportunity is just not there. They might as well just wait for 1 or 2 years before it picks up again, and then reevaluate the business case. For them, it's the challenge for them is they have to weigh in, okay, they have this TradFi business, which is a cash cow for most of them. Do you want to jeopardize it by making a bit of money in crypto during the bear market? And for most of them, I think the answer will be, no, not yet.
Yeah, or we'll see infinite liquidity on Bitcoin and Ethereum, and everything else will have like zero
That
liquidity.
That's also a possibility. Although, like, yeah, I would imagine it would not be on offshore exchanges. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
And okay, on onshore offshore, Coinbase has been doing really well. Like the stock coin has been doing really well. It kind of came off the lows, and I think it broke the yearly high, and perhaps and some on top of that. Um, from my understanding, the numbers haven't necessarily changed that much. Like their expenses are still sort of as high as they were. What do you think is driving this shift, if you had to guess?
Yeah, look, I'm not necessarily like the best stock or even token trader, positional wise. My guess it was just like oversold on all the
Mhm.
regulatory news. And now people are just buying into it again because it's just a really nice entry price. It's kind of like picks and shovels business ultimately. It's a way better. It's a pretty good way to get exposure to the crypto market, to position yourself for a future like move in the crypto market effectively. And also Coinbase makes it pretty clear that they're going to fight as well on regulatory side, which I think is kind of like positive for the whole industry, but also hopefully indicates that they are pretty confident in like how they're going to approach it. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question. Cool. So thanks for answering that. What are you mostly focusing on right now at Wintermute? Like where do you find your time being spent?
Yeah, it's multiple things. Like lately, it's quite a big degree of it is just internal comms. Like I found myself explaining more and more like to people like where are we heading, because yeah, it's a bear market. Like a lot of people like now not that much, but like half a year ago I think a lot of people were just very scared about whether the whole industry was going to survive, like where are we heading. And so a lot of it, yeah, is just explaining internally what are we doing, like why I'm excited, that I am still excited, that I'm still, I don't know, actually believe in the whole space. um Big part of it is basically guiding us to prepare for the next bull market, basically focusing on like next growth areas, whether it's basically expanding our TC offering or doing all this like adjacent product things. Like, yeah, I kind of wish I did mostly the product part because that's definitely the most exciting things. But yeah, I have to focus on the core business as well. So it's a bit, but it's also like a kind of like a flavor of the month thing. Like sometimes it can be just all about responding to some fun, well, not really fun like regulatory requests or those kind of things. Yeah, it's kind of like keeps shifting. Like one interesting analogy, I guess, is it's like it's I treat it kind of like a video game in a way where you basically just keep like progression on this like randomly generated levels, and but the game is just continuously throws more and more at you, and at some point it's kind of like depressing because like Jesus, like not this unkillable boss, but at some, and then you go through, I know we had a hack last year, and then we had FTX, and then like a few other things, and at some point you're like okay, bring it on, like yeah, I'm ready. And so now it's kind of like slow grinds towards, yeah, towards winning it out ultimately.
Okay, you set yourself up for this one. Why are you still excited? Why do you still have belief in the space?
Um, it's kind of, well, it's two answers really. First of all, I guess like okay, the weird answer is like this is something I know how to do. I'm generally like very interested in the space, like from philosophical point, I guess, like from my partially libertarian worldviews, from just like how cool technology is as well, and how much it can, like how much of a difference it makes to currently like very centralized world that we are facing, that I don't necessarily like. And so working on this space and making it successful basically positions me personally now and Wintermute as well to, well, to be pretty high up. Because for me, ultimately, it's all about, like I keep telling people like my lowest point was not after the hack, was not after FTX, was not like in January or whatever this year. My lowest point was summer last year, after Terra collapsed, after 3AC died, because like it was a start of a bear market very clearly. Like it was a start of something like very nasty. But my main, well, not like my main issue, but like I was basically thinking, okay, yeah, we did quite well. 2021 was really good. We did quite good. We accumulated quite some resources. We have decent team. We have like good brand. Like we have everything. Everything is pretty decent. But look at Alameda and FTX. Look at Jump. Like look at all those like really big guys. They're just gonna buy everything super cheap, and we'll have like no way to catch up with them. And so like it made me kind of a bit depressed because I just couldn't see a way how I can progress on this like leaderboard effectively, like whatever world crypto leaderboard or just general leaderboard, because it's like that's kind of, I guess, how I view the world ultimately. And now kind of like fast forward 1 year, like I can see a path for us to win effectively, to get pretty high. And basically coupling that with me generally being excited about space, it's kind of like double motivates me, because I like everything we do, and I also think we can win. So this is like a winning combination.
That's super exciting. That's super, super exciting. So it really does seem like a lot of your perspective on all of this is through a game of a lens of gaming, of like the lens of this is all one big meta game. And your team is Wintermute team, and you're building it out to kind of, take over this game. What do you think gave you that perception of the world? Like, were there any games that were super formative for you growing up, or like, why do you think like that?
I think it's not necessarily related to gaming, but it's just partially, I don't know. Like back in uni, I went through a stage where I was like overly philosophical about things. I was basically like searching for meaning of life and all those things. Like it resulted in a pretty bad grades for me. And I got like there were like 2 times a year I was about to get kicked out of university for like 3 years straight. So I didn't really do that well. But I figured out like, okay, I figured out like a meaning of life for myself, which was basically, long story short, you just make it like whatever you want it to be. And it did help me, like ultimate trick from it is just it did help me to abstract away from things. So not to take things overly personally, not to take things overly, I don't know, like emotional, I guess. So it, like in this abstraction, it can help you to be a really good gamer because you focus on a meta game. And like in my case, I'm hoping it will also help me to, be a better whatever CEO and better business person, because I can again abstract from all the emotional stuff and focus on the meta of it. I think I would describe it like this.
I have a personal question related to that, because that resonates very much with me. I think I think of the world very similarly, and I also do this abstraction a lot of times, but I also find that it disconnects me from my emotions in some ways and makes me sometimes miss the small things for the bigger picture. And sometimes, those small things are like the more important things in life. So I'm curious, like, have you figured out a way to have that balance? Or for now, is your focus just like, let's do this meta game full on now, and then we can come back to earth a little bit more down the line?
I basically have like a few side quests or like side hobbies or whatever that I guess keep me grounded and keep me still being like a human and not like a CEO robot that wants to conquer the world. I think that helps. Like I have, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons group that I've been part of for the last 5 years pretty much, and we still regularly play. Yeah, so it's like those small things, but also generally keeping connections inside Wintermute pretty personal. That helps as well. Like I don't know, like I'm a bit, how to call it? I'd say like I'm decided to be a bit weird, and that I have like a, I don't know, almost 2 personalities in a way that are trying not to, that are sometimes conflicting, but not always. One is like very, I don't know, human and like nice and kind, I don't know, whatever, friendly person, which I am, I think, a lot of times. And that's basically just helps me to empathize with people a lot and just trying to just be good, I guess. And another one is kind of like not opposite, but like calculating something, scheming, plotting. I don't know, basically somebody who's like really good in games.
Mm-hmm.
And now the best thing, like when I'm at my best, is when those two things, well, when those two personalities kind of like working on the same goal, I guess, if it makes sense. And
No,
that,
yeah, that makes total
yeah,
sense. That's a better. I think that's a better solution than what I do. I tend to just compartmentalize things and just kind of like put things away a little bit. And um, I think it'd be good to have a mechanism to revisit those things more and kind of like process them. Because I don't know, who knows? Maybe you don't need to process emotions, but I've heard so much like, oh, it's good to process your emotions and sort of like feel them, and
right.
it'll make you a more empathetic person or a better person.
No, that stuff I don't do as well. Like I don't, yeah, I don't process this. Like I don't know, maybe it will kick me heavily further down the line, but I'm kind of like ignoring that part that completely.
Are you also like, one thing for me, for example, is I'm not very backwards looking. Like I'm always just kind of like ahead. Like fuck, if I fuck something up in the past, like it's fucked. I'll try and extract the lesson from it, but I'm not gonna chew on myself. I'm not gonna chew on it in my head forever. I'm just like forward. Do you feel similarly sometimes, or do you think about things a lot?
Oh, very much. Yeah, like if I would think about all the fuck ups I did in the past, yeah, I would be very depressed and sad person. Yeah, so yeah, only forward.
um so you have 95 people at Wintermute now. It's a large company, especially in crypto, especially with a lot of the other large companies just dead now. Do you said you have some hobbies, you find time for things. Is that something that comes easy to you, or do you have to like tear yourself away from the day to day? Like how have you been able to structure it so that you keep the ship running, you keep everything going, and then you also can do these things that are important to you?
Yeah, good question. Well, to start with, like having a wife who is in a senior position in the same company and like who you can basically keep discussing work, whether it's weekend or not, helps a lot. Because we are quite different people with Marina. Well, I'm basically just forward looking, I don't know, let's create this new business, let's do this exciting thing. And she's like not necessarily opposite, but she thinks about downsides a lot more. She thinks about processes. She thinks about like how to do things properly as well. And that's like it does create some tension, but it also keeps me grounded a lot. So that's like things that's definitely like I don't know. We had a 17-year anniversary yesterday of our marriage, and that's still by far the best decision I ever done. Basically, like it's just so good to have a team
Mm-hmm.
effectively, which can conquer the world together. It's I think it's it definitely helps a lot.
Yeah, you make me feel very validated for just getting married. So, how did that start? Did you start Wintermute and then bring Marina on once everything was going, or from the very beginning, where did you guys start this together?
Like honestly, she was helping a lot even before we officially brought her in. And honestly, like there was a period of my time at Wintermute where basically Marina tried to help a lot, and I was like if I'm being honest, I was like, okay, I just want to do it all myself, and I was like in this like much over every period saying, okay, just let me do it my way, and like I don't know, don't get in. But ultimately, honestly, like we really started growing when I actually let go of all this like macho bullshit and decided to do it together. That just helped a lot.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but on this front of talent and bringing in the right people to do the right things in the company, how does your view of hiring function right now? Like, what are the most important things you look for when you are interviewing?
I think it's all about culture fit at the moment. Yeah, like it's obviously like it's really great to find a talented person, but it's way more about the culture fit, about how the person would fit with the company, whether they have a right motivation. Like we hired quite a few like mercenary people over the last year and a half, and now a lot of them left, which in certain cases was like tough on us because they were really good, professional, decent people. They were like generally good people, but they were just like in the industry for their own reason. And now everyone we get on board, like we are just trying to make sure that they, well, first of all, that they're interested in crypto in the first place, because that's already is quite important, because that means that they are here for the right reason. Because if you hire a person during the bull market, they will tell you all the right things. If you hire a person in the bear market, yeah, they're not going to join like a dying industry if they think it's a dying industry. Like they will only join if it's actually something like they think that there is an upside for them going forward. So it's a lot about that. It's basically just finding people who share our mission basically.
And have you found there to be a lot of those people as of late? Is it hard? Like you did say there's a lot more talent in the space. Is that just because some of the companies, some of the companies these people were at weren't functioning very well, or went bankrupt and they had to leave? Or how do you see it?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely a big part of it, that, well, a lot of companies either went bankrupt or did like a lot of firing rounds. A lot of people just left because even though they were not like fired, it just still made sense to leave those companies, for example. So like from that perspective, talent is good. But also, like, we had a lot of applicants like in 2021, 2022 from, I don't know, like, for example, like new grads, for example. And they would choose us because they thought, okay, crypto is cool, crypto is hot. Like, we still have a lot of grads, but now they're making a bit more educated like decision on that side, like, because they still have a lot of them, they have an option to, I don't know, go to TradFi trading companies, which are doing quite good over the last 3 years. Like TradFi trading companies, like if you take the aggregate of 3 years, they're definitely doing better than crypto trading companies. Because, okay, we had a stellar 2021, they had a stellar 2020, 2022. Like they had like way more, like way nicer run in general. And it's kind of like performance that speaks for itself. And so it's like people who are interested primarily in money, they would just go there, and that's fine. But
Are you in person first, or is remote also a possibility for you?
preference is like when it comes to Wintermute proper, like not the stuff that we incubate, like yeah, it's definitely office. Like we have a few exceptions, but I think ultimately companies needs to decide whether it's just everyone in the office or everyone remote, and you just cannot do any kind of in between, because if you do in between, then people who are remote would feel left out, or people who are in the office would feel that people outside of office are not working. Like it's always like those kind of tensions that are being created. And for us, I don't know, we just moved into a new office. It's awesome. Yeah, it's just we're trying to make as much reasons for people to be there as possible. Yeah, and I kind of like, I just like being with people. I come to office every day. It's just really nice.
Totally. It's so much. I think I personally believe it's so much more productive just from my personal work experience. And this last month I've been remote, and it's just so much nicer to be able to turn your chair around and just riff on an idea immediately with somebody sitting next to you. You said that you've been thinking a lot about product and things of that nature lately. As someone who's been a trader for a long time now, why do you think product draws you so much? Do you see it as more of a perhaps a real thing than trading is, or what's your perception on it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess it's a process of creation in the first place, that you can, like, trading is weird. It's just like a never-ending race. Like you can never create an end, like a finished product, because you just continuously like a never-ending competition with other trading firms. Like no matter what you do, okay, maybe you reach the size of Citadel and you're in a bit of like better like finished state. But ultimately it's like you cannot create like a monopoly on trading side. Like it's always going to be like a race. With product, like you can actually create something different and new. And it's also kind of like you have customers, right? Like train companies don't have customers. Okay, we deal with exchanges, like their customers maybe, but like I don't know, all train is anonymized. Like whether we trade on DeFi, CeFi, we don't know who our counterparty is, and we don't care to a degree. But with a product, you actually can serve particular group of people or whatever companies. Like you can basically fix somebody's need. You can, I don't know, change the world. I don't know, not for the better. Like I don't necessarily buy into this, but yeah, you can like change the way the things work, and you can I guess like to me the most interesting thing is like to look at a particular industry and say, okay, this is missing, or like nobody is doing it differently, and it would be quite cool to do it differently, like, and then we incubate it or we co-create it and see what happens.
Yeah, that
And just
resonates so much with me.
just like creating a new business is just super fun.
Yeah, just the creative process, just to have an excuse to have to think creatively and to have to like do that mix of first principles, but also with just like crazy ideas. It's so much fun. I
Yeah.
completely agree. I completely agree. Okay, last question for you, Evgeny. So some book recommendations, any genre. Maybe curious to hear why that book that you recommend, but that's my question.
Wow. That's a really tough one. um, well, okay, like if I'm looking at like really stuff that I will think I'll keep reading and rereading again, well, definitely Dune. And
Mm-hmm.
like all the way, not just like the original book, but all the way to the God Emperor, because I think it's also a really awesome one, even though like a lot of people disagree. Um, just because it gives you a very different perspective on things. And it's just like really well done, really well executed book, basically. It's like literally a masterpiece, I think. Um, from the books that like really influenced me to a big degree, um, in general, like early Umberto Eco
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely amazing. Like my favorite is Foucault's Pendulum.
So good. Yeah,
Yeah,
so good.
it's just very good. um, but yeah, like those two books would be like just continuously top of my list. I'm currently reading the Culture series, which I picked on completely randomly after I learned about like how Elon Musk's family office was called. I was like, oh, why is it called like this? And it was called after whatever one of the Culture series books. And I found it quite interesting. It kind of like it's a lot about actually you can actually understand like what vision Elon has with regards to AI, because it's all about this like distant human civilization, which is basically completely subordinated to AIs and like completely free from everything. And yeah, basically tries to find meaning in it all, which I found like, well, it's all about like finding meaning and finding a drive, which I found
Mm-hmm.
like really, really interesting about this, like the whole series. Yeah.
Have you read a Hyperion, the Hyperion
Yeah.
series? I thought that was an interesting perspective on AI as well, on like potential end states for AI. Um,
No, Hyperion was like, especially the first book, like all those like separate storylines. Yeah, it was just absolutely amazing. I'm not a big fan of time travel
mhm.
usually. So that's like when books go that direction, they usually lose me because
It's
I'm
too
just
easy, right? It's just too easy. Yeah.
too easy and I'm too much of a like logic purist to accept that it can possibly work. But yeah, the first book is absolutely amazing.
What about the three body problem? Did you read that series?
Yes, I kind of see like why people like it. Like part of it is I think it probably would have been like I probably would have appreciated it much more if I read it in Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
where I think it was originally in, because I feel like translation doesn't give enough flavor to a certain degree. Like I feel like I would have perceived it much better in Chinese somehow, even though of course I cannot read Chinese. Um, I don't know. It's pretty depressing, of course, but like the main concepts like of this dark forest, it makes a lot of sense. And it makes you like reevaluate, okay, let's just send some stuff in space and see what happens. Yeah, it sounds now it does sound like a really dumb idea.
Yeah, it definitely. I've had a Chinese person tell me that they've read it both in Chinese and English, and they said that it lacks so much depth and meaning.
Hmm.
So I think that makes a ton of sense. I liked it because it made me think of science in a way I hadn't in a long time. Because they tried to stay like to a degree true, or like extrapolate from where we are now to what those things could become over time, which I appreciated. I like it too because I like these books that make these predictions. Like it's kind of like the early Isaac Asimovs. Like they were like thinking of a world and seeing like which pieces of what they were thinking actually sort of realized and which ones didn't. Kind of like River of Gods is a little bit like this too. Um, but yeah, thanks for those recommendations. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Evgeny. As always, a pleasure. Thanks.
No, likewise.